Positivity is one powerful, very undermined tool that if you were to adopt, you could completely transform the trajectory of your life. I mean, did you ever wonder why does everything seem to work out so effortlessly, so perfectly, so greatly for the most unpredictable people, for the ones who are not even trying, for the most naive people? It's because they're not overthinkers. They're not lost in their thoughts of the future or the past, and that harbors positivity. And when you are positive, regardless of whether it's intentional or unintentional, you apply through positivity, you're actually using several ancient techniques that were known, that were spoken about often as methods to attract whatever you want in life. But perhaps the question is, how do you become positive? What positivity really is? And I understand that regardless of whatever we try to do, we will have to experience periods of negativity and periods of positivity. That we as humans, that part of our journey as humans is that we fluctuate between those two different states, between those two opposing states as part of the duality of everything that is in this 3D reality. But when the negative momentum, when the momentum for the negative becomes way more, overwhelms the one for the positive, that's when things get problematic. And then you kickstart, you perpetuate a negative cycle that keeps you trapped for another while, for more time. And then more negativity harbors only leads to more negativity. Negativity only induces more negativity. And one negative action, one action that makes you feel bad is gonna just pull another one and another one and another feeling and another thought, and it's just a cycle is perpetuated and it's endless. You have to be conscious to be positive. And so the question again is, how do you become positive? Because what I have found is that there are two essential factors that we cannot become positive without. The first one, and it's the most important, is it's patience. Patience and intentionality. Now, they're both rooted in presence, yet they also induce presence. And so you could look at it as the word present, and then coming from it is patience and intentionality, being intentional, as we're gonna be seeing now. But patience, what I realized is without patience, you can never be positive. And I don't mean patience as in waiting, because there's a very big difference between waiting and being patient and waiting on something or waiting for something to happen. Waiting teaches you desperation. Waiting teaches you an anxiety. Waiting induces an anxiety. Patience is content. Patience teaches you stillness. And when you're still, when you're calm, when you're just in the moment, when you're still, you get in the moment. And when you're in the moment, you're good. You're not desperate. You're alright, and you realize that it's alright no matter what. Waiting, on the other hand, is an anxious game. When you're waiting on something to happen, you are expecting it. You've already drawn a path for it to work out in that specific way. And if it does not harbor positivity, quite the opposite. And so it really affects you. It takes you out of harmony with life when you are waiting, versus patience is complete content, because you understand that you are okay regardless of whatever happens, that everything is alright regardless of whatever happens. I remember, a very nice example from back then. I used to go renew my car's license, yearly, annually, and whenever I would leave it to the till the last day of the license expiration month, and so I would go on the last day of the month, and it would be packed. There would be long queues waiting for the checkup, in order to, because everyone left it for the last day of the month, and now all the cars, all the licenses that were in that month are mostly in the last few days. And so I found sometimes that I would go and I would find the long queue. It's a very long queue, and you wait in the car for a very long time, and you know, it takes a lot. And sometimes I would be very happy with it. I'd be very glad that it's actually packed, that I'm actually having to stay here and do nothing, because at least I can take a moment for myself to be still. I can take a moment for myself that I'm not doing anything, that I can do anything, that I don't have to do anything, that I don't have to think about anything, and I can just be, and just sit there and relax, take a moment for myself. Other times I'd be very frustrated, extremely angry and mad and resentful, and I'm trying to switch lanes, all of that, and look for the shorter one, look for the quicker one, this and that. And what happens is that one time I kept switching lanes, going to the shorter one, going to the fast moving one, and then I noticed that it was about to close, and after they actually closed it, I went and I stood behind the last car that was there in the queue, and the guy left me. Long story short is that I've waited, because it was a little bit shorter than the queue I was in. I waited for less time, but when I reached to the checkup, actually, the guy was like, "We closed before you actually get here, so you will have to go, and I saw you come after we close this lane, so you'll have to go and start over from a new lane." And that's the thing. When you're impatient, problems tend to happen. You tend to perpetuate this negative cycle one way or another, because impatience means that you are desperate. Impatience means that you're trying to escape something. Impatience means desperation, and nothing good comes out of desperation. We think that by being in this grinding mentality, trying to hustle, and we have to stay very busy and very active and very occupied in order to get things done. And never try to take some time for ourselves, never do this, never do that. But it's quite the opposite. It's when you start resting, it's when you give yourself that time, is where it's like it's the harvest period. So you've been doing whatever you've been doing, but now when it's time for you to expect something, be patient. Be patient in general, because patience would only lead to positive actions and positive thoughts. You would never feel desperate that thing is not happened yet, that thing is not there yet. I find it quite funny how present we get when we're in desperate need for something from life, when we're asking life for something. Like when you're trying to when you're asking for something, when you're hoping that something turns out one way or another, you become very present. You're in the moment. You want it now. I'm asking you, life, get it to me now. I want it right this moment. Otherwise, I hate you. Otherwise, I'm going to be resentful. And so it all becomes about this moment. You cannot postpone it, for later. You don't have the patience for that. But with everything else, with what happens to us unintentionally, without our knowing, without, just from life, when anything happens to us, when we're in a different situation, when we have nothing to expect, we cannot be patient. Because when something happens, we already draw out the path for it, and we wait for it to work out that way. But we're not patient, because waiting only induces anxiety. But patience, you're good. You feel alright regardless of how that turns out, and so you're still, and so it leads to presence, but it also comes from presence, from being present. That is patience. Now intentionality is your next step after you awaken, and I'm gonna tell you in just a moment, how do you become patient? Why does it matter to be positive? Why do you need to be patient? So patience and intentionality are required for positivity. Intentionality, it's because you have to take, if you get stuck in that trap of negative actions, of negative thoughts, you'll never get out. You'll just keep indulging further and deeper in self-pity, in self-hatred, in self-sabotaging, in self-destruction, in self-harm. Whether it's on a psychological level, on a mental level, on an energetic level, or even on a physical level, you're doing it yourself. You're doing it, but you can't stop because you're so mad, you're so impatient, and you're non-intentional. But when you breathe in and out, do it now as well. You can see the stillness. You can see much clearer through that stillness. And now you can perpetuate a positive cycle where things end up, working out in your favor. By taking one positive action. Think about this when you're stuck in a negative cycle and you've been eating junk the whole day, you've been unhealthy the whole day, you've not been indulging in any self-care the whole day, and then when it's time for bed, you're just binge watching and you fall asleep unintentionally and everything, and you wake up the next day grumpy because you're thinking, I did not go to bed with intention, I did not sleep, I did not have my bedtime routine, I was just falling asleep, and you start feeling worse and worse about yourself, and you start feeling bad, and that pushes towards more negative actions and more negative behavior and more negative habits until it becomes you, until you cannot live without that, until you cannot live without binge watching or binging social media, or drinking your time away, or smoking your time away, or whatever. So intentionality and patience lead to positivity. Now, what happens when you're positive? What are those secret ancient techniques that help you attract whatever you want and put an end to this negative cycle? First and foremost, it was something that's coined by Neville Goddard as we know it today, which is the law of assumption. But it's been mentioned over and over in different scriptures and different dogmas and different doctrines from ancient times, from religions, from whenever, from whatever. Assume whatever you want when you're asking for it. Be that thing and you will have it. In the thousands, in the million of ways, different ways that it was put and that it was presented, and it all lies in this. Be whatever you want and you will get it. Assume whatever you want assume that you have what you're asking for, and that's when you get it. When you pray to God with this intention. That's what religion tells us. But so there seems to be a theme there. When you're positive, you're applying the law of assumption in your preferred direction. When you're positive, but when you're negative, it's in an unfavorable direction, and it only perpetuates and it keeps it going, the negative cycle. But when you assume that good things will happen, if I'm standing in that long queue, I'm waiting on patiently, and I'm assuming that it's gonna go by so fast. I'm assuming that this is what's best for me because now I get time to wind down and relax. I'm assuming that this is the best thing for me, and it works out every time, and it works out, and it just goes so smoothly. And by the way, that time when I had to switch lanes and then I went all over the other, I started all over, and then the checkup, when I reached the checkup, he told me that I had some problem with one of my tires and it had to be replaced. And so it's the whole thing becomes a grumpy situation. You see what I'm trying to say? That's because impatience. But when you're assuming that it's always gonna work out in your favor, you can become patient, and then you can be positive because you're optimistic. You're choosing to see the positive in things. Assume, be. So you would be applying by being positive, whether you have the intention or not, even you would still be applying the law of assumption in your favor. The next technique, ancient technique, is none other than the mirror principle, and that's something that's very dear to me. This principle, this concept, this idea, and it started with, of course, Hermetic sciences. It's discussed in the Kabbalions among the laws: as within, so without; as above, so below. Whatever you are, you reflect onto the heavens, and it gets reflected back at you. And it's just like a ping pong. It's just like table tennis. Whatever you are is what you project to your external reality, and that's what your manifestations, that's the form your manifestations are taking. You are manifesting onto your external reality. You as a soul, you're manifesting this whole body. You're manifesting this whole reality. And then it's simply reflected. It's simply a game of ping pong, back and forth, depending on, and if it remains the same, if it remains a negative loop, if it remains a negative spree, non-ending, that's just what you'll be getting back. Something has to change. Change one of the angles in either directions, and you change the whole trajectory of your life. And so by being positive, your self-impression is positive, your impression towards life is positive, and that is what you're reflecting. And the third technique is the law of vibration. Now, I could elaborate more on how that's working, but you already know that. This is just a gentle reminder for something that you know, for something that you always knew. This is your reminder to be positive, to see the positive in things, because it's gonna work magic for you. And the last technique is the law of vibration. Again, as within, so without. This whole life is a game of frequencies. It's a game of energy. It's a game of vibes and frequencies. Whatever you choose to vibrate on is whatever you deserve, is whatever you can suit and match and get and receive and have and live. Whatever you cannot vibrate on, whatever frequency you cannot vibrate on, cannot get there, cannot get to you. Vibrate on the highest frequencies, my loved ones. Vibrate as high and don't hold back. Don't feel bad for yourself. Acknowledge your human aspect. Acknowledge that you're ego. Acknowledge that it's part of your journey to falter and to fall back a few steps and to fall down all the way and to hit rock bottom and to go on negative sprees. But ultimately, keep the positive on the back of your mind. Know your true worth. Know your true self. That you're an extension of Source. And that's all I need to say. You're pure conscious energy. You're the manifestation of this whole existence. You're part of it, of this whole energy. Amazing energy. So vibrate on the highest possible frequency by being positive, by looking at the good in each and everything, by seeing the white. And it's not delusional. And I told you, I know that we have to, fluctuate oftentimes between negative and the positive, but just don't make your negative momentum way more than your positive one, because then you're going to be applying all of those secret techniques towards the negative, towards things you don't actually want to happen. And that would completely shift the trajectory of your life towards a direction you really don't like. So be patient and intentional. It's all that's needed. But you cannot be positive without them. You cannot find positivity. Many people would go through the same experience. Many of them would have a positive experience. Others, the rest, are going to have a negative experience. That depends on nothing else but choice. I choose to be patient through whatever. Imagine a farmer picking up the fruit before it's ripe. it tastes like shit. You won't eat it. But just give it a few more days and it's ripe, and it's one of life's magical creatures, one of life's most fascinating things. Similarly, even if you remove it, some vegetables or fruits, if you remove them earlier, they are poisonous. Give them a few more days when they're ripe, and they're magical. They taste magical, and you're gonna love eating them. And gardening was, by the way, it was the main thing that taught me patience. Having to work so hard without expecting any instant gratification, and you have to keep tending to the plant. And by the way, if you're waiting with your crops and you're not patient, you're simply waiting. As back to the difference between waiting and patience, between wait is that when you're waiting, you're gonna be anxious. You want it to turn out in a specific way. You might be in a hurry, you might be desperate, and so you're gonna try. You might overwater it and then it dies. You might underwater it because some fruits get ripe when they're in drought periods, when they're thirsty, and it could also die. Then you might shower it with love and you treat it like a baby and you overfeed it, and it would also die. But if you just let it take its course and be patient and still and intentional with your life, with yourself, it will give you one of life's most magical creatures. With that being said, my loved ones, thank you so much for tuning in and sharing this with me. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel, because it helps me so much, and it helps this video find its way to many more other beautiful people like you who might actually need it.